Welcome to this week's edition of In the Clubhouse with EMD Baseball. I'm Andy Kiritides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. We're in December. A lot of camps, a lot of showcase invites going out, on-campus camps, pay-to-play showcases. So we wanted to take a minute here to talk about making good decisions when it comes to selecting camps and showcases here over the next couple months. And this goes, I think a lot of this will speak in general to some of the camp decisions, but this is a funky window where I think it's easy to get caught up in feeling the need to get exposure. And I think that sometimes that can cloud good decision making when it comes to timing and the selection of camps that you go to. So there's some stuff to talk about. Hopefully we can provide some information to make some people at least think about the decisions that they're making here over the next couple months and where they're going to go. I think the biggest thing to understand is that we are in a quiet period. What does that mean? It means that Division I college coaches cannot leave campus to evaluate players, period. So anything that you do off of a college campus right now, there will not be any Division I coaches there. So if that's what you're trying to do and get exposure, that name whatever random showcase group is running a showcase in February, you're not going to get exposure to Division I schools. You're simply going to get some video. Maybe some Division II and Division III schools will show up, but to be honest with you, most of those schools aren't popping into a lot of those indoor workouts. So something to keep in mind right off the top. But I'll kick it over to you around some of the other timing stuff and some other things to consider in terms of the decision making around where to go, when to go, and making sure that when you do make these decisions that you're doing something that's going to benefit you and not be a complete waste of time and money.
Sure. I think the biggest thing when you're sitting down and looking at it, whether you're mapping out your summer early or your fall, whatever it might be, is to one, take into account who do you want to be seen by and who's going to be at the camps, clinics, showcases, whatever it might be, right? So if and to understand the differences amongst them. And I guess the easiest way to describe it would be, you can tell what type of showcase camp, if the college coaches that are going to be there are listed, they're likely being compensated for being there. So they can go ahead and put, Keith Glasser RPI will be at this camp. And you can pretty much put it in stone that I'll be there. If you see, and like for those, you think like a head first, a show ball, right? A PBR, a perfect game, those type of events, they can't pay anyone to show up to watch, but they'll tell you people who have gone to those showcases in the past, but they can't necessarily guarantee who's going to be there. And then obviously your on-campus camps, things of that nature. Who's going to be there. It's on campus at RPI. So the RPI staff will be there. You can ask at some of the Division I's, and a good portion of the Division I schools will have other schools that are represented as well. And usually they'll let you know who it is. So you have an idea. But, it's you want to know who's going to be there or have a really good idea if you're going to a showcase where they're not necessarily compensating coaches to be there, that the people you want to get in front of are going to be there. It's one thing if, let's say you're a freshman and you go to a camp and you're just going to get instruction from other people. Awesome. Like go get instruction from some college coaches and see what's up. But if you're of recruiting age and you're going to a college coaches skills camp is one. I used to work them when I used to work at Siena years and years ago. When they send the emails out and it says that it's going to be, Keith Glasser at Siena and Jeff Kyer UAlbany and, list the schools, right? If you don't see any coaches on there or schools that you're not interested in, like you don't have to go. it's not so like you're going to waste time, energy, money, and effort to go to some schools or to go get in front of these coaches that you have no real interest in really ever playing for or seeing. You'd be better off, maybe if down the road they're recruiting you, going to their on-campus camp later in the year. And it can save you money in the long run. And I think you want to know if you're going to spend, again, the time, money, energy, and effort to do this, you want to know that there's some sort of return on investment, right? And I think sometimes, and we've talked about this before, that a lot of people want to say that college camps are on-campus camps are money grabs. And look, are some of them out there? Yeah, I'm sure there are. But the flip side to it is if you're going to a UAlbany camp, and I used to work them, and this is just we're hypotheticals here. If you're going to a UAlbany camp and you're not a Division I player, then yeah, it's going to look like a money grab because you're not going to get anything out of it because you're not a Division I player, which needs to back it up to where you need somebody to tell you like, hey, that's not really a great idea for you to go because I don't think you can play at that level yet, or you can't play at that level. You can play at the Division III level. So you should target some Division III schools and camps that way, and on the, I mentioned Head First and Showball when I started this. You have Head First, which is high academic baseball camp, and you have Showball academic head coaches camp. And I've worked both. They're great events. But if you're not a high end academic kid, you don't waste the money to go to the camp, because if you don't have a certain GPA, SAT score, aspirations to play at those types of institutions, you might as well just take your money and light it on fire in your front yard. And same thing, like you want to make sure that you have the skill set to play at that level in order to go do it. Sometimes just because there's a plethora of coaches at an event, it might not be the best event for you to go to. So I think being able to have honest conversations with you and your family is to, first and foremost, what can you afford and what can you do? And B, like what type of setup gets us the most bang for our buck, where we can go to these camps, clinics, showcases, and get in front of the people it is that A, are recruiting me, and B, I want to be recruited by. And again, like the latter of that is the most important. You want to make sure that if you're going to spend the money to go do this and the time to go do this, that you're getting in front of the coaches that can make decisions on whether or not you can be a part of your program. Now, the flip side to this is you also have to understand it is a little bit of a gamble, right? Like you're doing this in order to get recruited. You might not be recruitable at that level or that school. So you got to understand there's a little bit of a gamble on your end too. But if you're doing it in a smart way where you're getting in front of the coaches and the level of coaches that you want to be seen by, the likelihood of you being able to be recruited, if you're recruitable, is higher versus, hey, I'm going to go to, the Vanderbilt camp and, you can't play at Vanderbilt. You're wasting your money. Like, sorry to the Vanderbilt coaches. Scott Brown, love the guy. But, the fact remains, like there's a small subset of players that can actually play at that program. And if you're not a guy who can legitimately compete in the SEC, then it might not be the best it might not be the best decision monetarily and time-wise to do. But know that like if you opt into it, that could be the outcome. So again, I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone. I'm not but that's just a reality that you have to understand if you're trying to go to some of these camps, and specifically the Division I camps. And now, because we are in a quiet period, it's the only thing they can do. They can't go off. That you have to go to them. That you have to make sure that your bare minimum floor is at the Division I level. Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing money out the window.
The one thing I will add to that is that do your research on other schools that might be at those camps, right? Because to your point, if you're going there just for Vanderbilt, no good. I think the Ivy Leagues do a really good job of this. So I'm going to use them as an example because I think that it's, I know Columbia does it, Penn does it, Harvard does it, Yale does it, where they'll bring 5, 6, 7, 10 schools to their camp that have a similar academic profile. So if you're a high academic kid and Yale's your dream school, going to Yale camp can be advantageous because you get in front of them, maybe you get an answer, but they'll likely have a bunch of schools there. So that's type of information that you want. Because to your point, if you're just going to Yale camp and, or, if you're going to University of Virginia's camp and they're the only staff that's going to be there and you're not a legitimate ACC guy, you're just donating money. You're not getting anything else out of that. And if you're okay with that, then, and you want to go for the experience and play on their field and, interact with Coach O'Connor and like do that kind of stuff, then cool. But if you're using it for a recruiting purpose, make sure you understand what you're getting into. And this is no different than what you were talking about with the showcases is don't go to a showcase that has 30 schools and 25 of them you can't play at and 5 of them you have no interest in. It doesn't do you any good. But the honesty around where you fit, where you're going, like you got to make some good decisions as far as that goes because you don't want to waste that time. You don't want to waste that money if there's not at least a chance that you're going to get a positive outcome out of it. And a lot of that comes with understanding where you fit in the grand scheme of things. And then 2, figuring out like, are there going to be other schools at this camp that I might be interested as well? Like if Columbia doesn't like me, well, Rochester and Haverford and Stevens and Bard and Vassar and Wesleyan and Franklin and Marshall will all be there. Well, I like those schools too, so maybe it's worth me going. So take that stuff into consideration. And then there's always the timing piece of it. And we talk about this and we're going to hit it again because it's important. Make sure you're prepared, right? If you're a Northeast pitcher and somebody's got a camp in the middle of January and you just threw your first bullpen the week before, don't go to camp. You're not doing yourself any good. You're going to put yourself in a position where you're going to have a chance to get hurt. And if you're a position guy, this is another thing too, is timing of when you showcase yourself, right? You go into the offseason here, say you're a middle infielder and you got some pretty good skills. You're a pretty good defender and, you've had a little bit of success in high school and you had a pretty good summer, but you're a 7.4 runner. You want to give yourself time to get that 60 down because if you go run another 7.4, you're not turning anybody's eyes unless you're just going to absolutely pound baseballs. If you need the offseason to get better, don't rush to exposure just for the idea of exposure. Now, if you want to use it as the ability to get some feedback to try to help your development and try to gauge kind of where you're at, and you have somebody in your corner who can reach out to those coaches and kind of get an honest assessment of like, hey, this is where we think he is, and it's going to drive your process. It's a little bit of a different conversation, but understand where you are in your development time frame. Because the reality is, and you've said this a bunch of times, there are very few coaches that if the first time they see you at a camp in January, there's very, very few situations where you're getting an offer out of that. Almost every one of those guys is going to want to see you play in the spring, want to see you play in the summer, and they want to see you actually compete in a full game setting. It doesn't mean that they can't fall in love with you at a camp and really like you. But usually camps are used for starting the recruiting process or finishing the recruiting process. So if you're in the starting phase of your recruiting process with some of these schools, just understand that even if they like you, the likely outcome coming out of camp is that they're going to say, hey, I need your high school schedule, get me your transcript. I'm going to try to come and see you in the spring type of thing. So just be aware of what's out there and be smart about what you're doing and make sure that you're ready to showcase yourself and you're not just spending money to get an evaluation because if you need that time, you need that time, and that's okay because the process is going to go specifically for 26s. Most kids, this process is going to go into August, September, October. So focusing on the development is going to be more beneficial than rushing to go and get in front of some coaches if you're not quite ready to do it.
Yeah, and I think for context, when you talk about finishing and starting the recruiting process, like you would be starting in January. Like no one is I never like to give hard facts in baseball because there's too many variables. But I would be hard pressed to find a lot of guys who are going to show up and watch somebody throw once inside for the first time ever and then walk out of it and be like offering that guy a roster spot, especially in January or February. The finishing is, the July, August, September, October camps that coaches will have on campus where they're going to want you to come. And usually they build it into a visit too, right? Like you're going to go, you're going to meet a bunch of players on the team. Maybe you stay overnight if they do that, and they get a feel for what you can do on the field, how you respond to coaching, all of those things to see if you really fit into their program there. So, no one's really finishing their recruiting process in January before the baseball season really kicks off. That's really the start of the recruiting process. And, quite honestly, there's a start with the January, February stuff, which I'm on record as not being a huge fan of, but I get it. And then there's going to be a pretty substantial pause in February, March, where especially if you're in the Northeast, like all those programs are going south from a college standpoint to play, like they're not around. And the high school season hasn't spun up yet. And then you're going to have the April kind of crawl where they're going to get out sparingly to see some guys. And then, May, June, July, August, September, where they're really going to hammer the road to be able to go out and see a bunch of guys. So, it's the front part of the year, obviously, you want to view as a little bit more of the starting point and then, adjust your finishing point to, the September, October timeframe. Obviously there's going to be people who are committing before that, but you kind of want to, back to the point is that you want to supplement your summer schedule from a game standpoint with camps, clinics, and showcases that are going to get you in front of the coaches it is that you are being recruited by / want to be seen by, and do it in a way that you're not spending thousands of dollars on every single camp every weekend to go be seen by the same coaches over and over again. Because they're going to be out seeing games and things of that nature, and the vast majority of them are going to want to see you perform in a game setting. So, making sure that you're targeted and you're doing this with some thought behind it for how you go about getting in front of the coaches it is that you want to be seen by.
Well said, my friend. I don't think I have anything else to add.
I don't think so either. Did we talk about it? We talked about this a lot today. So I feel like we said 95% of what we wanted to say.
Yeah,
that 5% is probably something that we covered. So we probably covered 100% of it.
Huh.
But
the math is mathing.
I'm a history major, so you can check my math on this. I am not the best math guy.
80% of baseball is half, or 80% of baseball is half mental. Isn't that what Yogi Bear said? Something like that.
Something like that. He had some pretty legit one-liners.
His other one that I liked is nobody goes there anymore. It's too busy.
Yep.
Yeah. Classic.
I like when he gives directions to people to his house. When you come to the fork in the road, take it.
My dad loved to hang on to that one out as a kid. Dad jokes. They're good.
They are good.
They're good. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. Tune in next week and we'll talk about some more cool baseball stuff. Talk to you then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.